And it's interesting that for one of those speeches, my evaluator looked at me and said, "Nah, Cyril, this is not the speech. I've competed against you and I've heard you give better speeches than that. Like come on." And so I'm in this war to get to Nashville. I'm not sure what speech I'm going to give. I am very sure how to give a speech if I have a speech. And so
Hello, Cyril.
I
Yes, I'm so happy to have you in the Break Time with Patty show. And
it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
yes, let me tell you why Cyril Junior Dim is here today, dear friend at home or wherever you are. Where do I begin? The first time I saw him in person was on the World Championship stage of public speaking this last August 2022 in Nashville, Tennessee. And I was so impressed by his message that I knew on the spot, before I even knew he would become world champion, oh my God, I have to interview this man. And luckily, when I reached out to him, he agreed to come share his story with you and I. Who is he? Number one, he is a master communicator. He is the 2022 world champion of public speaking. At the age of 24, he is now the youngest champion in the history of this contest. Cyril, has it been 100 years yet, this contest, or do you know?
I'm the 82nd world champion. We're missing two, but that was the 1940s during the Second World War. So it's, yeah.
Okay. Well, you're the youngest. You broke Ryan Avery's record, who was 25 when he won. Cyril was also the 2020 European World Champion, and he has spent over 10 years mastering the art of public speaking. Number two, Cyril is also a passionate software engineer. He is currently on a journey to find the sweet spot in the technology industry where the art of public speaking can merge with the science of software development to provide technology that will revolutionize the world. And finally, he is a fierce believer in the power of tactful communication. Okay, I've talked enough. Cyril, I would like to travel back in time a little bit to get a fuller picture of who you are. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how was it like to be in your shoes when you were a little boy and a teenager, please?
Right. So I was born in the UK. But I grew up in Zimbabwe. My mother raised me in Zimbabwe. It was a household of 4 kids running around, which says that my mom is a really, really, really great lady, a superwoman, if you will. She was able to contend with all 4 of us. I discovered public speaking at about the age of 11. It's interesting. I've been performing my entire life. Mom used to be an actress. And so the first time I was actually on stage, I was about 3. And when I first wrote my own speech, I was about age 11. And that really carried me into my teenage years, where I always felt like I had to live up to the guy I was on stage. And so I felt the weight of responsibility even when I was off stage. At about the time, I would enter contests, and those contests would be adjudicated by Toastmasters. And that's how I found out about Toastmasters International. And those were the years, interesting formative years, where I experimented and really found out what I wanted to do with life.
Wow, that is young. So basically you were never a shy boy. Were you comfortable on stage or did you panic when you were younger?
Actually, it's an interesting one to examine. As a kid, yes, I wasn't very shy. I didn't mind going on stage. We all put it under this umbrella term of confidence, growing up, I became more shy, and I can't explain this for the life of me. But I always felt like there was this amount of distance between myself and the audience when I was on stage. I felt like, of course, I had to take care of them as my audience, but it wasn't as intimate as being face to face with somebody and trying to connect then. So, yeah.
Yes. Oh, wow. Well, we have very different upbringing. I avoided any chance to speak until I joined Toastmasters recently, actually, or was it almost a year and a half ago? So good. And so okay, I guess you've been, so you were in the public speaking world, you were on the stages. So at what point did you make a decision like, okay, I'm going to fully commit to this public speaking journey, or that you really joined a club for the first time?
So that would be 2018. It was always a bit difficult to think of what I would do as a speaker or what I would speak about. I always felt, well, I still feel that my life experience, I could still add on a few more years, if you will. And so I wasn't always sure that public speaking would be the thing. And this is why software engineering or computers came into this world of mine, because we all played video games, we all had a computer lying around, we all needed to find backdoor ways of downloading books if we needed them, books. And so there was always a computer in my life. And I was trying to juggle what it was I would pursue. When I moved to Europe and out of my mom's house, I realized for the first time that there was an entire community that is Toastmasters in my city, very close to where I stayed, and that I could join them and continue this path of speaking and competing that I enjoyed. So that was about the autumn of 2018 is when I joined Toastmasters.
That's awesome. And I guess those were the days where people were still meeting in person.
Yes, yes. My first meeting was in person. It was about 30, 35 people in one room. That was awesome.
Yes. Did they make you speak like in a table topic?
Yeah. There was table topics, and they also had guest comments at the end. So they brought all of us on stage and they asked us, what did you think about the meeting? What would you improve? And so we had to speak on the first day.
Okay, I need to ask the world champion speaker, how was it like the first time that you were put on the spot and you had to speak? Were you confident then?
Not really, because the first time I had to speak, I didn't know who my audience was. The first speech I was ever assigned was a short piece that I had to write for National Tree Planting Day or something like that. And so I wrote it like any sixth grader writes their homework, quickly got it out of the way and ran off to watch cartoons. And on the day when I had to present, I realized I wasn't presenting this for my class or for my school, but we were going to the high school. Mm-hmm. And I was the youngest guy speaking there. And there was a member of parliament in the audience. And so really I felt out of my depth, and I felt I had to not only speak like these kids who were much older than me, but also impress a member of parliament. So yeah, that wasn't fun.
Yes. Okay. So I guess you have that in common with all the other champions I interviewed. They all have some traumatic story that they can always refer back to.
Interesting enough, that would not be the most traumatic story from my speaking.
I believe you, actually. I really, because with all those years of experience, I can imagine. Sometimes it could be so mortifying, but you learn, right?
It gets rough from time to time, but
yes.
We always learn from it.
Yes. And you bounce back because you have enough experience that you can probably freestyle, right? More easily than somebody like me, who's new, for instance, right?
That is always the recommendation. Just freestyle your way out of it. Try and look adorable or,
Yes. Oh, you were the Zimbabwean national champion of public speaking in 2016 on your 6th consecutive attempt.
That's right, yeah.
Ask you, so at this point, you're speaking on all kinds of places. What motivated you to start competing? Because there's one thing with speaking and being confident doing that, but there's a whole other one with starting to compete.
So the first motivation, I'll be honest, it was really selfish. I just wanted to be the best. Okay. I just wanted the recognition. I grew up in a very competitive system. We had a ministry of education, sports, arts, and culture, and every student was expected to try their best to excel in education, sports, arts, and culture. And so when I went to high school and I met my first mentor, he did a great job of painting the picture of the glory of these contests. You write a speech, you go to the next level and the next, and it ends up in this climactic huge speech contest once every year where the best speakers in the country converge, and you get to win that, and you're the guy that year. And I really wanted to be the guy. I wanted to win. That was my initial motivation, and I can't put it any other way. Of course, this motivation changed as time went on. But when I think about contest number one, I went in with one goal and one goal alone. I want to be the absolute best.
Yes, well, you're human and you're honest. You're an honest human who a lot of people want to just win and they're pretending otherwise. So at least you're honest. And yes, it's interesting actually, because Aaron Beverly, he was saying how he, when you want to, some people are more competitive than others, but when you really want to be the winner and you're only doing a contest to win. I don't know how many champions I've interviewed who told me that when you're doing it to win, you're not doing it for the right reason, and very often you don't end up winning when you're doing it to win. Right?
True story. Yeah.
So, but of course, there's a part of you, of course, who doesn't want to be a winner, right? But when you're doing it to serve your audience, that's what makes a difference, I guess.
Well, absolutely. I imagine. Well, I can say for a fact that winning and losing are a huge part of the contest. We can't escape that. But I agree with what you just said, that they can't be the motivation. In my experience, the desire to win affects even the way you compete, because you approach the whole contest in this get out of my way mode, where you're looking for threats at every corner. And people can tell that your mind is split between delivering the content and making sure you win at the end of the day. So for sure, it is something when somebody goes in just to win.
Yes. And okay, so now in this year in 2022, you made it to the top 8 best speakers in the world out of 30,000 outstanding speakers. And can you tell us what your first reaction was when you found out that you made it to the final round?
All right, so I'll be honest, I remember that moment clearly. I asked myself, and this was me talking to myself, because they just said the first winner, Cyril Junior Dim, and I was just about to get up, and I said to myself, why are you surprised? And it wasn't me saying I'm a great speaker. It was me thinking back to how hard we had worked for this, And it was me going back to 2020 and remembering the promise I made to myself when the results were announced and I didn't make it through to the final. I said to myself, Cyril never loses the same contest twice. You make sure if you're going to come back here, you're going to do this correctly. You don't lose the same contest twice. And in that moment when they announced, I said, well, why are you surprised? You made a promise to yourself and you worked for it. And one more reason I might have told myself that is I didn't want to start feeling like I was lucky to be there. Because I felt like if I approached the contest with this thankful attitude of thank you for allowing me here, then I would settle, I would ease up and I'd go into the finals unprepared. So because we were trying to be as focused as possible on the goal, I told myself, oh, don't be surprised. We anticipated this. We worked for this. So go up, accept the trophy, smile, wave, go back and prepare for the finals.
Speaking of finals, for your final speech that you shared as such an impactful message, it was called Ndini. Dear friend, if you haven't watched it yet, you can watch that one right here. And you should also go watch the Bogdan, the one that got him to the finals. Please, I'll put up the link here and also in the description below. And I was around there were a few world champions or champions around me, and we were watching it. And at the end, I had a lot of people who, and myself also, I said, wow, like just wow. It was, you left a huge impression on stage from the moment that you showed up. And there was a bit of a long pause between the moment that you showed up on stage and you had this interaction with the contest chair and this kind of silence. And then you just showed up. I don't know how to explain. You just like took over and you filled the whole room. Anyhow, enough. I don't want to give any spoilers. But can you tell us about the message that you wanted us to receive with this message, please?
So the message that I wanted to convey is that you are special the moment you start accepting the things that make you different. So it was a message of acknowledging that we're not all the same. We are not always proud of the things that make us different, but we are uniquely us. And when we accept that, when we walk into life with that knowledge of this is who I am, this is me, then those things that normally would make us just different begin to make us special.
Oh, that's a beautiful summary of a 7-minute speech. That is, yes. Yeah, because you were sharing your own story, but in the end, we were all relating to it because anybody who's breathing, I know you cannot speak to everybody on planet Earth, but it was a universal message, and definitely it resonated a lot with me and with a whole lot of other people. So thank you for that. And when you said your last word, I don't want to say it because I don't want to spoil it, and then you motioned to the contest chair after delivering your speech, what was going through your mind at that moment? Did you think that you might have a chance to earn the first place title this time? Did you care? Like, what goes through your mind at that moment?
I honestly was not thinking about the contest anymore.
Yeah.
From the moment I got the first laughter from the audience, the first time they laughed is something I said, I stopped thinking about the contest. I don't remember realizing even that I was in a contest. When I have flashbacks of my moment on stage, the few things I can remember are the screen with the timing cards, the frames of Mike Carr's glasses, a past international director, a regional director, I believe, who was sitting right there. She had been the contest chair in my semi-final, and she was sitting right there where I could see her. She had this proud smile on her face. And I remember looking towards the camera at the back of the room, and those are the only things that mattered in the moment. These people in front of me, this timing device in front of me. I could not feel that I was in a contest. And when I left the stage, the moment I motioned to the contest chair and move away, I am thinking to myself, well, this happened exactly how I imagined it would. And this wasn't to do with the result or the contest, but just I'd always dreamed of walking up on a stage like that, saying something that mattered to me and getting that response and walking out the way I did. So this is what I was thinking about in that moment.
Oh, that's amazing. Actually, after the contest, at one point, I think I went on the stage and it's just for the fun of it, I guess, just to see how it would feel like. And it's intimidating. But, and you came close to actually having to do it virtually, right? Was that an issue?
That's right. That's right. Well, first of all, that stage is infinite. My goodness, it's a huge stage. I had to go in the day before to see it because I didn't want to be surprised. So I went before just to see what that stage looks like. But regarding actually making it physically, when I got word that I was invited for the semifinals, that was June the 30th. I remember I was on a bus, 2 bags of groceries, minding my own business. And for some reason, I opened my mailbox and I see congratulations. And almost as quickly as I'm celebrating, becoming happy, I realized, well, I need a special document from Poland, my residence permit. It will allow me to get on the plane, and I'm going to need an American visa so I can get off the plane and get into the United States. And I didn't have either. And I had about 2 months to get that done and also have a speech ready that I could actually go to Nashville for. So it was an emotionally draining 2 months leading up to that trip to Nashville. If it wasn't for the support I had around me and the heads that really pulled together to make it work, I don't imagine I would have made it to Nashville.
Wow. Imagine that. Okay, so let's just take a minute here let's just say you couldn't get the documents, Cyril. You had the right, it was a hybrid competition, so you'd have just had to give Bogdan and Ndini virtually, right? Which I'm assuming you had practice for. What do you think would have changed, basically? Or do you think they would have made a difference?
I don't think I was emotionally ready for that. When I had this dream of doing the world championship, the dream was always the same, walking out onto a live stage, a crowd going wild, lights in my face, a contest chair. It's how I'd always dreamed about it. I'd always imagined that I can do my very best when I'm in a room with people. Now, that's not to say that I wouldn't compete if I couldn't do that. It's just the emotional tone would be entirely different, entirely different. And I feel this factor in and of itself may have affected how I approached 2020. I did my very best in 2020, but there was still this idea in the back of my head that, look, I'm in a tiny room where besides the judges, the Wi-Fi could get in the way of my success in all this. There was something about it confining me. And this is why I can look at speakers like Alexandre with a measure of just admiration, how he could do that by choice, actually, because Alexandre revealed that he did that by choice. He chose not to be there because something was more important to him. And how he could still be so impactful while talking to a camera. I feel like it's something I still need to practice more of. And it would have affected me if I wasn't able to be on the physical stage as I had dreamed of.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And it's interesting you say this because I was there. So first of all, I watched the 2021. It was a fully virtual competition, and I watched the entire thing because I was sick, so I was stuck watching all of it, and I enjoyed it a lot. People were a lot more prepared in 2021 than they were in 2020 because my car killed it. You know, he took over the screen there. Linda Marie Miller was fantastic as well. And but when I was in Nashville, I really wanted to be there in person because it had such a huge impact on me. The 2021 virtual one, I said, oh my goodness, what is that live one going to do? And there were about half who weren't present, my participants, and the other ones were virtual, like in the semifinals and the finals about. And there was a huge difference because the ones on screen were so used to the screen, first of all, and we saw their big face on the screen. And then the ones who were in person, you were on the screen, but you were small, right? We would have to look at you on the screen. So it was just very different as a, you know, so, but you commanded the stage, you took over, even if you were like a, you know, like a long figure on the screen versus the big face that, you know, like we would see Alexandre Matt or Mass afterwards and all the other ones. So it was interesting that you still took the place, but it was very different experience sitting from the room.
Absolutely. I think many contestants think about the contest in terms of those two speeches. And so it's very easy to condense the entire convention into 14 minutes, but that's really not it. And I'm glad that I went physically because I could discover it, meeting people, talking to the other contestants physically before. Going backstage, it's very interesting when you're backstage and they're putting on your mics, you know, because these tech people are looking at you, trying not to have a mental breakdown. They're asking you, are you ready? Do you need water? And then they just leave you alone. And it's the best they can do for you in the moment. You can tell they really want to be there for you, but the best they can do for you is leave you alone. And then afterwards, people coming to you, talking to you, telling you what they felt about your speech when they were listening to your speech. And that one day before the semifinals and the final, you know, the preps, the messages from home saying, look, we heard you made it to the finals. And then the actual day when you walk into that room and you're looking around, it's like a gladiator arena where it all feels so real. And so I imagine it's a huge part of that whole event, experiencing it and getting stories in between those 7 minutes. So when I think about Nashville, I think about it in terms of about, I don't know, 3 or 4 days worth of stories rather than the 2 7-minute speeches. I actually think those speeches were perhaps the least interesting, for me at least, the least interesting bit were those 14 minutes. Everything around that was life-changing.
Yes, it was. And also just the human contact, right? Seeing humans in person, all those different champions and all those people from the districts. Anyhow, I'm really happy that I went there. I didn't get to meet you, but by then you were too busy anyhow, so I could not have run into you. But anyway, I saw you on stage and I'm with you today, so I'm very happy. And did you watch the other participants compete, or you're the kind like you were just focusing on practicing yourself?
So because I was so stretched thin, emotionally speaking, I chose not to watch them on the day.
Okay.
Chose to watch them the day afterwards. So I actually didn't know what happened in those contests until the day afterwards.
But that's sort of good because I find our brain tend to, you would probably start analyzing, comparing, maybe even thinking of changing things, which would have been catastrophic. Although you did add a little element, right? That was not planned, that you freestyled on. I think I read that in your article.
I did. I did. So, well, first of all, talking about not watching the other contestants, I think we can also associate this with why people don't want to speak first, because they don't know what's coming. They don't know where to set the bar. And I think this approach that I took kind of solved that for me because there wasn't a bar. It was just Cyril being Cyril. I imagine sometimes you could go there and try and set a bar. I was the fourth speaker, and you set the bar just slightly above speaker number 3, number 2, number 1, subjectively speaking, of course, but you don't know who's coming later, and you're still in this contest mix. And I didn't want that. So it was just Cyril on the day. But yes, coming to what you asked about the moment when I freestyled, I was backstage thinking about the speech. I was basically going idea from idea to idea and just confirming that I understood the flow of it. And I realized originally there was a part of the speech that was a uniquely Toastmasters story. So listening to it, you would feel it better if and only if you're a Toastmaster. Yeah. And I felt I don't want that. I want anybody at all, anybody who listens to this to feel it. And so I decided to move the story with myself and Nick from a Toastmasters setting to another place where we met quite often and where we spoke quite a bit and where we may have gotten in trouble quite a bit more. And so that's how you find the story with Nick moving from a Toastmasters meeting where it was originally set to a library where Nick and I would convene so many times.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yes, I think that was a very good idea. I see the impact of doing that, just to connect with more people, right?
Absolutely. That was the goal. I was a bit worried about time, and I imagine quite a few people who heard the speech beforehand had a mini heart attack, thinking, "What are you doing, Cyril? What are you doing? That's not what we wrote. Cyril, what are you doing?"
Yes.
But by then, I was only my mentor, Naomi, because we got to talking afterwards. She did not freak out, but at that point, she was like, "He's there. He's ready." So she was more relaxed in that moment and before that moment, really. But everybody else was like, "If you had gone a second over time, Cyril, we were going to kill you."
Oh my goodness. Yes, it's harsh. That's 7 minutes, 30 seconds, right? How long was your speech, by the way?
It was just over 7 minutes. I know a few people but there was the long pause at the beginning, and even you addressed that early on. And I always enjoy listening to people interpreting that pause because they look at it and they're like, Cyril is composing himself, he's taking time, he's in control. That's a powerful introduction. And I hate to ruin it because the truth is much simpler than that. If you look to the right, you can see shadows moving. And I paused to allow the contest chair to sit down because my opening statement was actually going to be about her. And so that's the pause you have at the beginning there. So, yeah.
But did they start? They're not supposed to start counting until you do something. So they were not supposed to count that, right?
Exactly. So that wasn't counted. When I turned and opened my mouth is when I saw the timer hitting the stopwatch, and I knew from then that I was on the clock.
Okay. Whew. Wow, so much emotion. Okay, sorry, I keep asking. I'm going off script here, but your speech, Ndini, was it a recycled old speech or was it a brand new speech?
That was a brand new speech. Actually, I would say it was the culmination of all the work we had done leading up to the contest. Now, we were trying to unlock the secrets. What can I do to be a better speaker? What can I do to do well in the contest? And everything seems to reconvene around this idea of you got to be authentic. You got to be you, and you still have to have an original idea, and you got to go out there authentically and give that, and that's going to work. And when I was in this mix, this fight of trying to get the temporary residence permit and the visa, I had about 3 other speeches that I was working on besides Bogdan. So there were 3 speeches in between that I thought would be the final speech. And it's interesting that for one of those speeches, my evaluator looked at me and said, "No, Cyril, this is not the speech. I've competed against you and I've heard you give better speeches than that. Like come on." And so I'm in this war to get to Nashville. I'm not sure what speech I'm going to give. I am very sure how to give a speech if I have a speech. And so I'm going back and forth with my mentor. And I always tell the story of how she and I were arguing because I was telling her, look at how difficult my life is. You know, just because I'm Zimbabwean, I have to apply for this and that so I can simply go and speak for 14 minutes. And she looks at me and she says, "Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that your life is more difficult than, say, a single mother?" And she knows that's my soft spot because for a while my mom was a single mother and I couldn't answer. I couldn't answer her. You know, the call ends and I look at my passport and I'm there thinking, this is me. This is me. And I started writing it down. And this whole idea of everything I had done with that passport, getting a name removed from it, being authentic in a contest. And I thought, it doesn't get more authentic than talking about yourself and what you did. And so that's where this entire speech came full circle, and we had the idea and we felt really good about it. So we were pretty sure it's something special.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And that, because that's speech speaks directly to me, because that's something I've struggled with my entire life. Just being okay, just thinking that I'm enough, I'm good enough, and I don't need to be somebody else. And no, so that speech is really, I encourage anybody who's alive to just watch. It's just 7 minutes. Anybody has 7 minutes to do anything, right? So you captured it beautifully.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. That was the goal.
I loved it. Loved it. Okay, so now that I have such a seasoned speaker as yourself, I would like, a lot of people struggle with the fear of public speaking. I don't have to tell you this. I'm sure you know this. And what would be your best advice for someone who just doesn't feel comfortable pushing record on their phone, on their devices, on social media, in the world, or it's not necessarily just stepping on stage. It's also in meetings at work, and somebody who just doesn't do it. What would be your best advice for them, please?
Well, I've thought about this at length, and I would say something I've never advised before until I thought about this question specifically, because typically I would say practice, be more exposed, get stories, and and all the practical stuff. I feel an even more important step is to analyze that fear and ask yourself, what am I really afraid of? It's important because typically when we can put labels on our fears, we can investigate whether they're merited or not. So for example, I'm worried that I'm going to look silly. Yeah, we can investigate that. Are you really going to look silly? Perhaps you're talking at work. I mean, they hired you. You went through the interview process. They probably trained you even. You're probably, to some extent, a specialist in the field. So are you really going to sound stupid? Probably not. Another fear, people are going to judge me. You can label it so you can investigate it. Are they really going to judge me? And if so, what are they going to judge? What are they going to think? And if so, do I really care? Does it change anything? When we atomize these fears and look at them for what they really are, excuses, we find that the only thing we should really be afraid of is if this message is ready, is if it's ripe, is if it's good enough to give. I feel that's one fear I never want to let go of. I always want to be afraid and kind of nervous about whether what I'm about to say is ready, is mature, is ripe enough to be presented to an audience. because then I know that my heart is with the audience, and it's not about myself. It's not about how I look, how I sound. It's really about these people that I'm speaking to. So for anybody who's confronting this fear of public speaking, I would say that label what you're confronting. What is it that you're really afraid of, and investigate it. Many times you'll find that your fears are easily dismissible and replaceable with healthier fears, fears that are actually going to propel you to be a more impactful speaker.
I feel like saying amen to that. Yes, it's so true. This fear of being judged. Yes, they're not rational necessarily, but they cling to us, right? And they paralyze us, and they're in our way of so many opportunities.
It's a survival instinct, really. And a survival instinct is really about caution. It's about saying, don't get close to the edge of the cliff, rather than, going over the cliff. I'm going on tangents here, but it's a survival instinct. It's your brain trying to ensure that you are as safe as possible, as far away from the edge of the cliff as possible. But the best view is right there at the edge of the cliff. You've got to get up there to the edge of the cliff to get the view. So, yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love this. I'm going to put myself on the edge of that cliff. I have work to do. But yes. Okay. Can you also give us, please, 3 best tips to be a phenomenal and memorable speaker? Because you are one. So I figure you must have some best tips in your back pocket. What would they be, please?
All right. Well, the first one is, I think all speakers need to know what their currency is. And I think the best currency for any speaker are stories. You collect stories, you've got things to talk about, you've got examples to draw from, you've got life experience that kind of forms the foundation of your body of knowledge. I think it's a really good habit for all speakers to start collecting stories from their lives, from their days. Anything that you can write down and come back to later on. Story, it's our currency. It's what we cash in every time we're going on stage. So my first tip, collect stories. My second tip would be to get a team. I prefer to call it a team, but it's basically the idea of don't work alone. A speaker has one job and one job alone. That is to go on stage and deliver the material. Somebody else has the job of receiving the material, critiquing the material, deciding whether or not to accept you as a speaker. That's somebody else's job. So it's good to have a circle of trust that can kind of mimic the audience. That is to say, it's good to have people that can show you the things about yourself that you can't see. People who can tell you what you look like when you're speaking, so that you can progressively readjust your speaking to a more exemplary mold, if I can say so. So it's good to have support. It could be a coach, it could be a mentor, it could be a team of friends, it could be a Toastmasters club. It's good to have somebody who mimics the role of the audience and tells you what you look like when you're speaking. The third tip, and I hate to sound cliche, but there is no substitute for practice. You can make it more specific though. I try to think of this in terms of principle. One rule I enforce with myself is never cheat the audience. That is to say, if they know you're going to speak, prepare. One rule is I try to never give a speech that is not at least 2 weeks old, or in an ideal setting, a month old. That means I have had the speech ready. I've been rehearsing it for at least 2 weeks. That's how prepared I am to deliver the material. It does help a lot with the nerves, but also I walk off the stage feeling like I did the audience justice. I did all my homework. I did all the writing, all the refining, all the rehearsing. I did everything I could to make sure they could receive value in this moment. So you could think of it principally as well. If you're going to speak, what are the rules of your practice sessions? What are the metrics that you use to label yourself as prepared? So what does prepared mean for you? So there is no substitute for preparation. Those would be my 3 tips, my favorite go-tos when I'm working on a speech.
Wow. Yes. Wonderful. I love those. Oh, I'm going to start writing a speech and I'll be applying all your little tips. And I don't know when that will make me world champion, but I'm sure it'll definitely help. Thank you, Cyril. And one other question I'd like to ask, you are a software engineer as we speak. I guess that's still your job, right?
Right.
Yes. And how do you feel like, because you're a very busy person, how do you see yourself merging the two, like the world champion speaker and the software engineer? How do you feel like these two worlds come together?
Well, I believe there is space for public speaking in every industry. Every industry needs individuals who are able to fluently communicate the ideas of their field. Every industry needs a gateway to that industry, a gateway to the knowledge of that industry. And typically, it's the people who can speak. Those are the people who then share to the world what we're doing behind the scenes. So it's very important to have efficient communication or public speaking as a part of any industry, really. I try not to think of these as uniquely different. I feel that public speaking and the ability to communicate is an indispensable part of my being an effective software developer. Of course, I do take the time out to improve my technical skills. I try to always be doing a course. I try to get stuck as often as I can. And I try to be the source of solutions to the problems I create. So I'm always in this, I believe, vicious cycle that every developer falls into, where it's not working, you don't know why it's not working, you hate everyone, you want to break everything, and suddenly it starts working. You don't know what you did, but it starts working. Then it stops working again, then it starts working later on. And at the end of the day, you realize the solution was much simpler. And it's a vicious cycle, really, of us trying to figure out how to make stuff work. And it's fun, and I enjoy it. And I enjoy explaining how I made things work in the end. So it's absolutely fun.
Yeah.
When I think about the doors that the World Championship has offered, that is to say, I imagine I am going to be speaking more often, and I imagine I'm going to be speaking maybe not necessarily about software development or the processes that we're working with back there, but I have tried to prioritize and to live on a calendar. So I know for sure when I'm speaking, my team knows in advance when I'm speaking, when I can't be available to them. And I try to make sure that I'm not booked too tightly so that one team is deprived of me for an extended period of time. It's really about prioritization at this point.
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely. And just very quickly, because obviously for software engineering, since you're developing somebody's requirements, I see communication as being extremely important, because often a client tells you something, I need this and that. And it's very clear in their head, but it's not communicated well. So communication is key to actually make sure that you can deliver a solution that meets their requirements. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, okay. What is next for Cyril Junior Dim? Please do share.
Well, I try to be very secretive about my goals. So I do have some goals that I'm not going to tell anybody until they come true. That I hope to be giving that speech of, I've dreamed about this for so long. I, of course, am heavily invested in my career as a software engineer. I do see myself going up the ladder of seniority because technology is fun, science is fun, and I enjoy it. It's something I'm passionate about. But I also imagine I'm going to be more involved in spreading the knowledge of how effective communication can essentially change lives. I'm looking for any opportunity to have a huge number of people together and do workshops, keynotes, and anything that dispenses that knowledge. I realize as well that I have an obligation to give back. Much of what was given to me to the point where I became a world champion was given without any expectation of paying back, and I'm looking for any opportunity to do that. Toastmasters International is a huge sandbox where I can do that. For example, I'm thinking of contact I can establish with schools back in Africa. I'm actually in talks right now with a group of universities in Ghana that hopefully I can help in some small way. And as long as I'm leaving my mark, I feel, and as long as I'm doing my very best, of course, I feel it's a good few years coming ahead as a speaker, as a software engineer, as a professional in general.
Yes. Yes. I pray for all those things to come true. You're so young. God willing, you have decades and decades and decades to change the world, basically, one message at a time and one workshop at a time. I'm looking forward to see more of you. And finally, if someone in the audience would like to know more about you or reach out to you, what is the best way, Cyril?
All right. So you can find lots of information about what I'm doing on my website. It's www.cyriljuniordim.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, Cyril Junior Dim, Facebook, Cyril Junior Dim, Instagram, Cyril Junior Dim. Fairly straightforward. My mailbox, and I told my email address to Nick, the guy from the speech, and he laughed at me. So I feel kind of silly saying what my email address is, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's Ndini@cyriljuniordim.com. Ndini, as in the winning speech, at cyriljuniordim.com is how you can reach out to me. It's interesting as well, Patricia, that you said I look forward to seeing more of you. Probably I will be in your district next year.
District 61?
Well, then probably not, but I will be in Canada.
Okay, good.
Close enough.
How exciting. In person?
Yeah, that's right.
Ooh.
That's right. I am going to visit one of the districts in Canada, that's for sure.
Yes, we have the best districts here in Canada. Just kidding.
I'm excited about that. I'm excited about that.
Every district thinks that they're the best districts, but yes.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I would be excited to connect and exchange with hopefully your viewership that's going to listen to this interview. Yeah.
I'll make sure they will. You better. I'm just kidding. They will. And okay, let me just share my main takeaways before we let Cyril go. Dear friend, you are special the moment you accept who you are. Did I quote you properly? The moment you accept who you are? Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Be authentic, be you. And if ever you panic with the fear of public speaking or speaking in public, really, analyze that fear. What are you afraid of? Put a label on that fear. I love that. What do you care about what people say or think? And is your message ready? Is it ripe? And finally, I have to finish with the 3 tips, the best 3 tips. What is your currency? Collect your stories from your life, from your days. Second, get a team, a support system, a circle of trust. And third, practice, practice, practice so that you can do your audience justice. Woo! Any parting words or last story you'd like to share with us, Cyril?
Well, this has been absolutely fun. I really enjoy this. And I want to thank you for helping me go back on this, reflect on this journey that I took in Nashville. It's always that when I talk about it, I remember a thing or two that I may not have remembered speaking to somebody else in the past. And it's always special for me to relive that week in Nashville. It was a very transformative week. I learned so much, and to go back over it all and talk about it is really uplifting. It leaves me in a really good place. I'm probably going to sit down after this interview. I'm not going to say much, but my head will be going so many places. That's just how impactful that week was. And so I want to thank you for this as well. And I want to thank you for really taking the opportunity to encourage your viewership to pursue this skill of public speaking, efficient communication, or whatever it is that makes them them. So I really appreciate the work you're doing here, Patricia. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cyril. Oh, you have made my entire month. And what a pleasure it was to talk to you. I knew we would have a good time because you're you. But thank you. And at home, wherever you are, thank you for watching. And I hope you enjoyed this time with Cyril half as much as I did. And please leave us your comments in the description below in the comment section. And I will leave you with this. The power of your voice can change the world. Find it and use it. See you in the next video. Bye.